But make it important. Use singing, use technology as you can, but stress the importance of intonation. Let's go on to precision. I think you know where I stand on intonation. Precision, this idea of ensemble uniformity and togetherness. If a band is not playing together, it's because they did not breathe together and or they're not listening, counting, or watching. How to achieve better precision. I know groups that play really well together, they're tight, and I know groups that have struggled severely simply to play together. For entrances, your band has to breathe together. And this goes back to the breathing gym, the breathing exercises. If the students are not breathing together, they are not going to play together, and they're not going to make their best sound. So you monitor that you're giving them a good preparatory gesture in the appropriate tempo where they can get a good breath and they can enter together. You can have them sing. If there's a precision problem, you can have them sing instead of play. I find this in an honor band situation often, or my own group. Those kids know me, but we cannot get an entrance together. I'll have them take the instrument out of the way and just sing on Da. Would you do that with me, please? Just sing on Da. Check your posture, all right? Yeah. Like Mr. Sliker said, sit like you're going to stand. I like that. Okay, just say Da with me, please.
Da. Da. Da.
We didn't get any of those together, but they're closer than the head we had. Instrument, thank you. Now you can slump. But get the instrument out of the way, and just so they get used to, okay, breathe, play together, and then maybe you have a concert F or something. But I hear bands, they don't play together. They don't start together. I have tried this year and last year to be more on top of that with my band. I was much too accepting of close. And so our entrances, our attacks would be kind of like this and not this. And I will not accept an entrance like this if I can help it. And that's on me. They're going to get by with what they get by with, but I'm the gatekeeper there. If that attack is not together, if I let it go, it's going to create a bad habit, and they're not going to take the care of, no, we need to set, breathe, and play. Set, breathe, play, and be exacting about what we're doing. Close is not good enough, not for me, and not for my students. So breathing is an important part of that. Listening. Direct the students listening. We can't just say listen, especially with the young students. And my students. Direct them. Who do we listen to? Well, who has the motor here? Trombones have 8 notes. Right. Who has the motor here? The snare drum is playing 16ths. Absolutely. We're all listening to that's what we're listening to. So you'll direct them, help them find that. Where do I listen? Okay, I'm listening for timpani here. Now I'm listening to the trumpets. They have the motor, and direct their listening so they can be actively engaged. That will help their precision. Help them find the rhythmic activity or the built-in metronome. I simply call it the motor. Where should we be listening? When ensembles are not precise, I hope all of your ensembles are precise, but when they're not, it's primarily because the members are not listening. It really has very little to do with watching. I think we have conductors that say, you need to watch, you need to watch. Yeah, that's part of it. But the bands don't play together because they're not listening to each other and they're not reacting to each other. That's why Cityscape, I told you, conductorless. That's hard. That's a hard piece. Start. They get into it, then meltdown. Start. They weren't listening. They were relying on me. Well, you're not keeping time for us. I'm not there to keep time for you. I'm there to set a tempo, but I'm not there to keep time for you.
Would you also say that goes back to breathing?
Sure.
And part of that, you made sure that everybody takes the same type of breath, the same
Tempo.
depth of breath, taking the same tempo so they can start together, not just listen, but also doing the breathing too.
Absolutely, it's all connected, it has to be in time, that's a great point. And then when they're playing, I want the band to function like a 55-piece chamber group. So they're listening, they're not relying on me to keep the beat for them. I'm not there to keep time for them. I'm not there to do that. And the second time they went through it just fine. I do this on slow music, Irish Stew from County Dairy. I'll do it on Shepherd's Hay. I want to be, I don't want to be the person responsible for them to stay together. And I do a lot of conductorless work like that. Scales, they need to have this idea of inner subdivision and pulse. So I want them to be engaged. I don't want to be the one up there, they've shut everything down and they're just watching me. That's not going to work for us. So if they're not playing precisely, most of it is because they're not listening and they're not thinking about an inner pulse. The techniques, I highly encourage you not to conduct. I love not conducting. I love walking around, I'll get right in the middle of the band, listen to the clarinets, listen to the trumpets, get back around the percussion. I can see the fear in their eyes when I do that. I love having fun with them, but it helps me have a different perspective for the band. I'm back here listening to the saxophones and things like that. So get off the podium. All right? You say, well, I have a little 6th grade band. I have a 7th grade band. That's difficult to do. I've done this with 7th grade bands. It's just a matter of trust. And maybe you're going to take a few bumps and it's going to melt down. No harm done. It will be better over a long period of time. Another festival story. This is a nice band playing Armenian dances first set. They basically melted down on stage at the festival. Couldn't get through. It's a good band, but they could not play together. And you know the ending dance. That's where it was just a mess. Okay, so I'm listening, I'm watching, and so I was up for the clinic. So I went up and I said, okay, man, I want you to start here. And you could just tell rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, they fought that. And they get to a festival and it just was a mess. Okay, man, we're going to start here at the beginning of this dance, and you just keep playing. So breathe with me. Breathe. They play a little bit, kind of melt down. We'll do it again. Breathe, play, and I stopped conducting. They played it without a hitch to the end. The conductor was getting in the way. That was the problem. The conductor was trying to control that and just let the band go and give them a little bit of credit. Experiment maybe in a safe way, but I think you'll find that it will reap a lot of benefits. How about pulse drills? Do you do these with your groups? Yep, we'll do fine. Pulse drill. Let's do this. So we're in 4/4 time. We're just going to clap in here, if you would. So the rhythm will be quarter note on beat 1, quarter rest, 8th rest on 3, 8th note on the and of 3, quarter rest. So bong, 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 but we're just going to clap. All right. Let's clap several measures of that. Are you clear on the rhythm? Okay. And just clap until I stop. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, let's do that again. Let's do it again. 1, 2. Stop. So what are we doing? We're what? We are rushing? Yeah, absolutely. Big time. Let's do it again. 1, 2. So we didn't get the first beat. 1, 2, 3. Interesting. We're a room full of sophisticated musicians. We haven't played the first measure right together. One more time, please. And 1, 2, keep going now. anticipate. Don't anticipate. Still early. Wait. Wait. There. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, thank you. Let me make it a little bit easier. Let's do just a quarter note on the first beat, followed by 3 beats of breaths. Just quarter note on the first beat, 3 beats of breaths. And 1 and 2, ready. No toe taps. No toe taps. Clever, but I caught you. No toe tap. You can wiggle those toes on the inside, but no toe tapping. 1, 2, ready. Okay. Do any of you do these with your band? You have a precision problem or don't have a precision problem, they're excellent exercises for developing an awareness of inner pulse. And maybe you have a metronome set up electronically where you start it on a scale. Then take it off. So they're thinking. Do that over a period of time, again, that will reap benefits. I don't know that I would do it every rehearsal, but I would do it regularly. The Ed Lisk Alternative Rehearsal Techniques book is full of ideas like this. But again, you've got to find a way to get the responsibility for time and precision on your students and not you. Watch me. No, 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 no. That's exactly the wrong way to go. Get yourself out of it. But my kids won't be able to play. Yes, they will. Maybe not right away, but over time. If you approach it the right way and just trust them, be patient with it. Don't overdo that exercise. It can be frustrating. If they struggle with it just a little bit along the way, that kind of goes back to my idea of I want them to be able to play virtually anything I put in front of them at some point without me. For them to have that kind of independence. I'm not there to keep time for them. But this idea of precision, and many bands do not play together. They're not listening to each other and reacting. They're also not being accountable for time, for pulse. They're not engaged. They're just disengaged, just watching. Watching is important, but it's a third piece of that, of playing together. Execution, this is a tough one. This relates to students learning their parts, and that's their responsibility. We have to, and that's just an age-old challenge, is to get students to prepare music. I don't do chair tests, I don't do playing tests at Iowa, maybe you do. I used to do playing tests when I was teaching in Texas. I try to come at this with the honor system of, the sense of team, that everyone to be able to contribute has to be prepared on their part. So I try to come at it from a positive standpoint. I remember I conducted an all-state band up north once, and the kids came in and they were not very well prepared. And I told them so. Kind of goes back to this idea of honesty, and absolutely shocked them. No one had ever told them that they weren't anything but the best of everything ever. And it's like, you are not prepared, and they were just shocked. And we had to work really hard to get that program put together for the concert. But you've got to find a way to inspire your students to want to prepare their parts. And maybe that's a good old-fashioned way of chair test or playing test or coming in to play for you, or whatever the case may be. But the execution, and that is the more technical, like we talked about earlier, are they playing the right notes, the right rhythms at the right time? That is essential. It's not musical, it doesn't equal music necessarily, but they have to be able to do that. You're not going to have a rewarding performance experience if you have students that are playing wrong notes and wrong rhythms. So you've got to find a way of letting them know that's their responsibility. And we are the standard bearer. What are your standards? Is close good enough? You know, what's within reason? But you have to demonstrate that that is just not acceptable, or it isn't acceptable. I had in symphony band in the fall, we programmed Dance Macabre, the old Heidel transcription, and the two first chair trumpet players, there's a real wicked, when they have the melody in there, it's a really wicked passage in there, and they were fumbling around. And I usually don't stop. I usually say, okay, students know when they can play something and when they can't. And they're on the honor system to go and figure it out. And so they obviously know they can't play that part. So this went on. About the third time that we went through it, they're still kind of fumbling around on it. And I said, trumpets, you've had a problem with that passage since the reading, and it's not improved. And then things get deathly quiet in rehearsal at that point. And I said, the next rehearsal, I am going to go down the line on that. That's an old school technique. I said, you've had time, you know you're struggling with it. I am going to go down the line on that next rehearsal. Well, if you put something out like that, you better follow through. So the next rehearsal, I started with that. And we went through, and everybody's like, okay, here it comes. And so we went through that passage, and they nailed it. And then I acknowledge, trumpets, that's much better. But if you say something like that, and you don't follow through, that's a problem. Now that's a tactic I don't use very often, but I thought I've got to up the game a little bit, because that was one of those situations where it just wasn't, and I'm not going to yell, I'm not a yeller, and there maybe out of enthusiasm, but I don't yell at students for not being prepared. It's like, okay, we're going to do that. And it worked in that situation. But I try to come from the intrinsic side of being a team. We have to rely on each other. I don't offer M&Ms or cash to play parts correctly. And I do remind my students weekly that individual practice is important. They're busy kids, and I just remind them of the importance of individual practice. And the people on both sides of them rely on them. I also think many of our students assume, or that we assume, our students know how to practice. And I think the younger those students are, the more care we have to tell them to, okay, slow this down, take 4 measures at a time. Again, okay, you need to take that home and practice it. Okay, they go through and they kind of play through it at normal tempo, no progress is made. Well, I practiced it last night, yeah, but it didn't improve. What did you do? Well, I just played it. Let's slow this down. Let's maybe take out some of the difficult articulations. Let's go measure by measure. We can build on that, but tell them, show them how to practice. Don't just say go home and practice. I think that's an important part. Interpretation, got about 6 minutes here. So this is more the musical side. Dynamics. They're such an important part of musical expression. From my own experience, I have to work really hard with the symphony band to get them to play softly. They don't just come in with built-in great dynamic range. They play the loud stuff just fine. I don't ever have to work on that. But I have to work really hard to get them to play softly. When a composer writes a soft dynamic, I really think they're trying to convey something special. They're not just trying to write something soft. They're trying to convey something special is happening. I try to treat soft passages very carefully. When I was in the Tech Symphonic Band, we recorded Macbeth conducts Macbeth Volume 3. I was the principal trumpet when he came to campus. He did those series of those albums. And so he'd come to campus and we'd record in Allen Theater, and he'd rehearse the band, and then we'd record. And that album we did Beowulf, Feast of Trumpets, Grace Preludium, Pacha, Cavada. Can't remember what. That's pretty good for many years ago. 90% of our rehearsal time was spent on just dynamics. That's it. 90%. His work was about balancing and dealing with volume. Wasn't phrasing, wasn't style, volume. 90%. As a little, probably junior at that time, That made a huge impression on me just as an undergrad. Well, he's working that much on volume, so it's really important. We get too much in our band world of boring mezzo forte and forte. It's all the same. That's on us. Our bands don't play softly because we don't insist on it. I'm sorry, they're not going to do it. So we have to work to insist upon that. The most breathtaking musical moments I can think of are when groups play softly. I heard the Marine Band once play a pianissimo at the Midwest Clinic that was breathtaking. I mean, I was spellbound by how moving that was. So we have to be careful about that. Dynamics have to be organic, not contrived. We can do too much. We can crescendo too much, too soon. It's not natural. Sometimes we're only supposed to swell a little bit, or sometimes a lot, but it has to fit and be organic. Articulation, kind of like dynamics, we need to avoid the boring world of generic one-size-fits-all articulation. This is where I find exaggeration is really important. I avoid T articulations. I don't like them. Ta, T's. I just don't like them. You hear that kind of explosion on the ta. I'm a trumpet player. I grew up with the ta system. Ta, 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 ta. I've converted to D's and dos to try to soften that. You still get a precise initiation of sound. Rick Lambert probably swayed me to do that when he was teaching El Paso Coronado. He used D's and dos. You still get good clarity without that hard that explosion of the T. But try to get a wide range of styles so that if it's staccato, it's staccato. If it's marcato, it's marcato. If it's tenuto, it's tenuto. So it has some personality to it. As a conductor, I spend a lot of time on phrasing. I spend a lot of time on articulation. I don't spend as much time on dynamics as I